Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, just to follow on from that, Ed. I mean, I think the moment that is sort of interesting here is that, I mean, to look at it in sort of digital terms, this is definitely very much a long tail phenomenon, in that I sort of feel like this moment kind of almost privileges those museums that have these very unique and singular focuses, in the sense that it's like, if you're a giant municipal art collection, the difference in the experience of that collection versus yet another giant municipal museum art collection is it's sort of like, well, I mean, why go to the giant museum art collection when the Met is literally right there? However, the such and such museum of maritime art, somewhere in Maine has this collection that is unavailable anywhere else and is of interest to a lot smaller group of people, but of an intense interest. And so it's almost like for the first time, there's a possibility of museums sort of realizing this sort of like, well, there's a whole audience out there. And as long as I'm not dependent on that audience being physically present within the city limits,
right,
there's a possibility for me to connect with them. Whether that will, that's a very sort of like, techno utopian take on this, but I mean, it's interesting though.
I actually want to stay with that for a minute, Koven, because I think it's actually illustrating one of the areas where technology provides something to some museums that they simply didn't have before. I really like your distinction between niche and generalized. And I would say it's a good example of how the people who are finding those specialized content may not care it's a museum. They don't give a hoot that it's a Billings Farm and Museum or the Basket Weaving Museum. They're interested in that particular topic. And one of the things about the internet is, especially if you make yourself findable when you put the content up in an accessible way, people from around, you may not have a big enough local audience to really make you thrive on the few people in your area that are interested in learning how to shoe horses. But if you have an international enthusiasm of people who really want your experience with historic farrier practice, you can at least build up the audience and the fans and then figure out how to turn it into a financial income stream. And you're absolutely right. That's very different from going to a big museum whose physical experience may be unique, because that's where I can go downtown on a Sunday with my family. It only takes me 20 minutes and I like hanging out and I like the atmosphere, and it's a place, it's one of my third places. But online, there's nothing to distinguish it. I mean, even if they have a really excellent high quality program, how do they make it known and findable that it might be better than the 3,000 other things that would show up in a search algorithm about 19th century art?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And this moment kind of privileges uniqueness of voice in a way that I'm not sure we've really seen to this degree before. That it's like a unique voice sort of makes you findable in a way that just like a totally awesome collection maybe kind of doesn't actually. It doesn't sort of lift you up above the morass of everything else. So yeah, it's an interesting moment.